Hey everyone, welcome back to the Spark Studio. Today, we've got something special for you. A new episode of the Community Spotlight. On this episode, I spoke with Erin Koshut, the Executive Director of Cummings Research Park, about the history of CRP and all the unique challenges with managing such a large project. Let's roll. Hey Erin, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Doing great. We're really happy to have you here in the Spark Studio today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about some of your professional interests?
Sure. I'm Erin Koshut. I'm the Executive Director of Cummings Research Park. I'm located within the Huntsville-Madison County Chamber. I've been in this role for just over 6 years now. Been living in Huntsville since 2015, I believe it was, a long time ago. And so my professional interests are, really centered around supporting our community and having a small hand in how Huntsville continues to grow, and being a part of that.
Yeah.
And for my kids, I've got a 13-year-old and I have a 10-year-old, and so it's really about having a hand in seeing the continued growth and opportunities that Huntsville has.
That's great.
And so the position has allowed me to do that. It's allowed me to branch into other areas within that role.
Yeah.
And that's been fun. I've been able to tap into some new opportunities, and I serve on the Association of University Research Parks Board of Directors.
Wow.
As a vice president. And that's been an amazing opportunity to network with colleagues across the country.
I'm sure.
So.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so kind of what brought you to Huntsville? I'm curious.
Sure. So we were living in D.C. at the time.
Okay.
My husband worked on the Hill, and I worked for a public affairs company at the time, and we were working with clients in D.C., but across the Tennessee Valley, around kind of high-tech issues advocacy and public affairs campaigns around certain topics. And we had been married for a little over a year and knew that we wanted to start a family at some point. And for us, DC was not conducive to that type of environment. We have plenty of friends who do it, and they do it really well. We just knew that for us, we wanted a little bit different of an experience. So that's what brought us here, my husband's job. And then the firm I was working with, I was able to open up an office here for them and run that office here before. So did that for up until I had this position. Started this in 2015.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's actually really similar to what my wife's parents did. Is they were living up just right around D.C. and then moved down here just because of work and because they kind of just wanted to, get out of the city a little bit more, and they've been super happy here.
Yeah, we have been too. It's been remarkable to watch Huntsville change
and
have so many of the different amenities and quality of life aspects that we loved in DC or when we would travel to Philadelphia and other places. But it's much more family friendly, and we don't miss the traffic at all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's one of the best things about Huntsville. Like as far as like living in Huntsville is you've kind of got all of the great things about living in a big city, all of the benefits there, and then a tiny fraction of the traffic.
That's right. That's right.
Everything's so spread out, kind of horizontally instead of vertically, that, it ends up being, you've got these little pocket communities that develop where you can go and you can spend a whole day doing something in this one part of town, and then on another different day, go to a completely different part of town, and it's like you're in a different city. And I think that's really cool. And of course, Research Park is definitely one of those pockets. And it's something that has, for many years been just kind of a staple of Huntsville. And I was wondering if you would kind of tell us a bit about the history of Cummings Research Park and what has its development been like over the years.
Sure, absolutely. I always love an opportunity to talk about the park at any time, so happy to do that. Cummings Research Park was, began in 1962, but the ideation of it began several years before that. So we had, at the time, community leaders were gathering, and they were talking about what makes a community successful.
Yeah.
And they were talking about things at the time, with Werner von Braun leading the discussion. They were looking at things that maybe you might not think about, and certainly not in the mid to late 1950s, right?
Yeah.
And it was things like a symphony. That's why we have the state's oldest symphony.
Yeah.
The Museum of Art, Graduate Research Institution, how UAH began.
Yeah.
Right? All those different elements. And so, what's interesting is that when you talk about successful communities, it's not only the businesses, it's not only the university and academic environment, it's the quality of life amenities. So it's all those components that even, almost or more than 60 years ago, they were being discussed at the time. And one of those other ideas that were brought up in that meeting were a place that was located right outside Redstone Arsenal, where companies that were supporting the arsenal could locate and collaborate with one another, work with one another, all in a place close by. And the city leaders that were part of that discussion and some of the business leaders that were in that discussion, rallied around that and started to look at what that might be.
Yeah.
And they looked to, essentially a research park concept. And they traveled over to Research Triangle to look at how they did theirs. And many of the guidelines and ordinances that we have today are because they were seen at Research Triangle, so really modeling it after that.
Yeah. And
the two business leaders worked with the city to establish some guidelines for development, and they took the first plunge. Yeah. And Milton Cummings and Joe Moquin, founders of Brown Engineering, bought the first 150 acres off a dirt road that we now know as Sparkman Drive.
Wow.
And they moved their company, Brown Engineering, to that first location, and then they began to subdivide those 150 acres and sell them to other companies, second being IBM, and so on and so forth. And where Teledyne Brown is today is their original location. They've just continued to expand. Yeah. And this concept took off. I mean, it was a popular concept at the time, and the fact that it was modeled after other places across the country. And with very specific guidelines, really defining the types of companies you wanted in that research park. It was called Huntsville Research Park at the time.
Yeah.
And, this, like I said, this concept took off. The original Lockheed Martin, which wasn't Lockheed Martin at the time. Yeah. They were one of the original founding companies. And you had others that kept locating in the city, in the late 70s, they were running out of land in Huntsville Research Park. Yeah. So they purchased farmland across Rideout Road at that time. And established essentially the 1962 part of the park was CRP East. And in 1982, they created CRP West.
Wow.
Different sets of guidelines and rules. Kind of lessons learned, as you would expect. Yeah. In the 80s, Milton Cummings passed away, and they renamed the park Cummings Research Park. And then, kind of fast forwarding, Bridge Street was developed. Yeah. It was initially developed to be in the center of CRP West. Wow. But that's where AdTran wanted to grow and establish a headquarters there. Yeah. So it was absolutely a no-brainer to have them be there. And Bridge Street was moved to, kind of a corner there where we now know it is. And it was originally designed to be a service center for, if you will, for employees. Yeah. And by moving it, it has become a regional retail destination. So, really pulling from all over, and have been incredibly successful in that respect. Yeah. So it's developed over time. We had a master plan in 2016 that really talked about adding value to this oldest part of the park. Yeah. And how do you do that? And making some changes to allow that to happen for the private sector to come in and do some of those changes, and then making some additional options available in CRP West to amenitize CRP West more so. And, now here we sit, 2021, we've had 5 years of that master plan behind us. Yeah. We have 320 companies currently in the park. more than 26,000 employees, and 13,000 plus students from ninth grade through PhD inside the park. And we have 3,843 acres, and 250 of those are left to develop.
Yeah.
So it's, it's been a, next year is our 60th anniversary. And we've had 60 years of success. We weren't immune to some of the ebbs and flows that our community has had, but we have a lot to be proud of, and the economic driver in our community.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think one thing is that CRP is really a fantastic example that innovation doesn't necessarily mean coming up with, a completely new idea. I mean, the idea of a research park wasn't, CRP isn't the first research park ever, but innovation can also take the form of looking at how can, this idea be adapted to this community, and, how can that serve the people, around me? How can I take this idea that I've seen and really work it into something that, can reach a broader range of people than it might once have? And that, initial leap of faith that they took really clearly paid off, buying the land and being the first ones to move in on it. And now it's reached so many more people. I think that's insanely impressive.
It's a great example of, some of the earliest public-private partnership efforts here that have continued to reap dividends.
Yeah.
And that, is an example for some really successful, efforts when you can pull, public and private partners together to come up with some really great solutions.
Yeah.
For everybody. I mean, we pull our employees inside the park come from, the 16 different counties that the Huntsville Metro pulls from in their labor shed.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable to kind of sit here and reflect nearly 60 years ago with how far that partnership has brought our community.
Yeah. And I mean, that public-private interaction is really, I think, something that kind of defines the business landscape in Huntsville. It's something that very few cities really have, it seems like. And I think that a lot of companies really do owe their success to that kind of ethos. So what are some of the most significant challenges that have been overcome to get CRP to where it is today?
I think constantly being willing to adapt to how the business market changes and what companies are looking for when they choose a location to expand or to locate. And how do you do that in a way where it is a public-private partnership to this day, finding the win-win for everybody that's at the table. And that changes, what that win-win is, what the businesses are looking for, and where they choose to expand or locate continues to evolve. And so the challenge is constantly, how do you come up with these creative solutions? How do you fund them? And then, how do you continue to keep the park relevant to the businesses that chose to locate here? You kind of add value to their location decision and continue to grow. And, the side note to all this is also, for me in my role, one element is to make the park a vibrant and active place for the employees that work there or the students that go to school here. And what does that look like? Because that's constantly changing.
Yeah, definitely.
So those are, just some of the things that we have to look at, and year to year they change.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating because with a project, it can be really difficult to kind of organize everything when it's fundamentally not a closed system. And with a project the size of Cummings Research Park, it really can't be closed. And, with that whole paradigm of public and private, it would never work as something that's, we're going to do what's best for us. It's kind of got to have that reciprocal nature to it. And yeah, I mean, it's clear that Research Park has really been a boon for the broader community as well. I mean, I know that every time I'm in the area and I drive by, it's just like, I think one thing that's really remarkable is just, it's a really beautiful part of Huntsville. It's always one of my favorite areas to just, if I'm going to get out and go on a drive, I like just kind of going around the loop, and everything's really beautiful. And, it gives a chance for me to become familiarized with the businesses that are in Research Park.
Absolutely.
And, that's in a way almost like some very subtle marketing. It's just, it puts those names in my head and, kind of breeds that familiarity with it. And then those names become kind of inseparably connected with Huntsville as a whole. I think that's one of the things that really Research Park has been most successful in, is really taking its businesses that are located there and tying them to the identity of Huntsville.
That's great. I love the way you put that.
Well, thank you. And then, also Cummings Research Park and the I2C here really share a lot of similarities. Very much a shared vision, but definitely vastly different scope. And so with the CRP being the second largest research park in the United States, I can't imagine how much work must go into managing everything. So what are some of the unique strengths and drawbacks to such a large project?
Well, the good news is that much like anything we do in Huntsville, it's a team approach.
Yeah.
CRP started as a team approach, and to this day, it continues to be a team that ensures the success of CRP in Huntsville. And so that's honestly one of our greatest strengths, I believe.
Yeah.
So you've got the city of Huntsville, you have the Madison County, you have the Huntsville-Madison County Chamber, which is where I sit. So one of the strongest linkages in that partnership realm. And then you look to, all of the city of Huntsville workers that maintain the park, that keep it looking beautiful, that make sure the roads are nice, and then the businesses, and the employees of those businesses. And so I think, collectively, if we talk about our collective, just like the companies that are in I2C and the UAH environment that I2C sits in, CRP's strengths, one of our greatest strengths, is the collective team that this community has had and will have going forward to ensure its success. So that's, to me, when I think about what is our strength, I think our strength is absolutely the team that ensures the longevity of CRP.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all about support.
It is. And we couldn't do it without those partners and their individual support, efforts to our overall collective approach. And we couldn't do it without the companies that are here and their employees. Yeah. And so I think those are really the strengths that we have. And I think the drawbacks are not drawbacks. They're much more about figuring out how to be the most efficient with your plans that meet the needs of the businesses that are located in your park or that may locate in the future. And I think, having a master plan developed that doesn't sit on the shelf, that is actually worked, is one of the things that leads us to that. And so that's kind of, I think about it a little differently, I guess, in that respect. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm sure that the businesses there as well, and even the employees recognize that there's so much to be gained by being in that position there in Research Park, that, that support is, that mutual support is very clear to them as well. And so I kind of wanted to transition a little bit and ask, how about for you personally, having just passed your 6th anniversary of being named the executive director of CRP, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced, and what have you done to overcome them?
Well, I can, no position that anyone takes is without challenges, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons we take positions and continue our journey of professional and personal growth is because we want to be challenged.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough in my professional life to do that and have that both professionally and personally. And this job was a great opportunity to be challenged and to play a meaningful role. For me, I had a number of skills that I brought to the position, but I had a number of skills that I did not have and had to figure out how to, what was the best way to do that. So, when I came to this position, I had no real estate experience.
Yeah.
And so figured out where I could go take a course with, it's called the International Economic Development Council, IEDC. They had a real estate development and reuse, which is interesting applications at the time for us, but gave me some fundamentals. And then through some other coursework, I was able to develop, for me, I'm not going to be an expert in any one area that the position requires, but enough walking around knowledge to know. Beyond what I know, experiences will teach me. Same with, business incubation. I mean, that was not an area that I knew anything about at the time. And so I, figured out that it's called MBIA, which is the International Business Incubation Association, and went and did their business incubator manager certification. So I could figure out how best to support the growing companies, those startups, through their growth to be these larger companies. Because for us in the park, it very much needs to be about all company cycles of growth. We need the startups. We need the startups to be successful. We need those to lead to companies that are scaling, and we need those to lead to our most successful companies. We need all of them. And so that was, a challenge is I don't have these skill sets, so let me try to figure out how to learn enough to be dangerous, so to speak. And it was just enough to have some walking around knowledge that led us to down some different programming paths here in the park. And so personally, it's been an incredibly rewarding position. Not every day is different. I never know kind of what will be thrown our way. And that's one of the things I really enjoy, because that in and of itself sometimes can be a challenge. So those are just a few things that I think about right off the bat.
And what would you say is like kind of the number one lesson that you've learned since starting in the position?
I'll actually think about, my husband used to quote this all the time. He's a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And they had a coach named Chuck Knoll, longtime coach, Super Bowl winning coach. And my husband used to always tell me the quote from Chuck Knoll was, "Don't get too high with the highs, don't get too low with the lows." And I think that's been the biggest thing, is to kind of remind myself and level set. There are times to get really up here in the highs, whether positive or negative. But really, just be flexible, be nimble, take it as it comes, and celebrate the wins, figure out how to tackle, the challenges or the losses as they may be, and to try to stay even keel through it all,
Roll with the punches.
Roll with the punches. I mean, that's what I think about, is kind of that was one of the things to really learn through something that is, working on something so impactful.
I mean, that's really important in any business. I think that when the times are really good, then you do have to kind of be a little careful not to kind of still overstep and overextend, and keeping like some groundedness about it yourself is really important. But also, being willing to, in a bad situation, say, hey, maybe I need to innovate in some way to overcome this. So
I think that's, it's, when you, to go back to the quote, when you get in the lows, how do you be scrappy? Right. And how do you continue to be the old quote, the man in the arena, who's getting dirty because he's just out there working. He's working it hard. And when you're tackled with something that's a challenge or something that's not going the way you want, how do you kind of roll up your sleeves, get a little dirty, as the saying goes, to really work it out and to kind of turn it around. And you can't do it by yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, having that, we talked about support just at that, grand level of, the whole project. You've got these different kind of sides to it, and they're all leaning against each other. But also just at a very interpersonal level, from, one worker to another, you kind of have to have that support so that you can break things down together and then tackle each of those little, smaller tasks to achieve something greater. And so from there, I'll ask, what about Cummings Research Park do you think is its biggest asset? Is it the park's location in Huntsville, being near, Redstone Arsenal, or is it the people working in the park, or is it something in between?
I think it's all of it. I mean, CRP wouldn't be CRP if it wasn't located in Huntsville, if it wasn't located in the kind of community ecosystem that we've had for decades. Certainly wouldn't have had the success that it has had and continues to have without being in Huntsville. And it's been successful because of the people that are employed here, the people that learn here, and, recently the people that live here inside the research park. And, it all comes back to the people. And, that extends to the CEOs and site executives for the businesses. I work for those companies and those employees to make, with our partners, the research park be the best research park it can be and the kind of community that we have and need the research park to be.
Yeah. I mean, clearly it's working. I mean, like I said, it's the second largest research park in the United States and I believe it's the fourth largest in the entire world.
Yes.
That's just ridiculously impressive. And so what do you see for the future of the research park?
Oh, well, I see a bright future. I don't think Huntsville expects any less. And so now it's, well, how do we craft that? Thankfully, we have a master plan that was developed with partners and supported by partners. And so how do we, continue to make it great? What does great look like? How do we make it a place that continues to support the businesses, their employees? When employees look at, where do I want to work? We want them to select the businesses that are in there because of the kind of environment, our community has created. And so I think you can see that. I think we've got a number of redevelopment areas happening inside the park, particularly in CRP East. So as we look at the next 5 years, seeing a number of those come online, the Alabama School for Cyber Engineering and Technology just up the road, it'll come online next year.
Just drove by it on my way to work.
Yeah, it'll come online next year. And at its max capacity, it'll be 300 students that'll be living there and going to high school. And then
it's a high school?
It's a high school. It's a statewide magnet residential high school.
Wow.
So they will be living there. They will be going to school there. They'll be focused on cyber engineering and technology through their high school curriculum.
Wow.
So that'll be just up the street from UAH, just up the street from Calhoun, across the way from Huntsville City Schools, Columbia High School. So that's part of our future, is that workforce development and positioning the park and its companies to take advantage of that talent.
Yeah, definitely.
And what do they want in the future? And we've got, thankfully, an updated master plan that will help guide that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's pretty amazing, because I'm sure that those students being there, literally 5 minutes from, the heart of UAH, which, in and of itself has a very similar goal. I'm sure that that's really just going to continue to lend to that interconnectedness, that, tight network of support. And that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And so really, I mean, it sounds like the questions that you're asking yourself now to figure out how to make Research Park be the best it can be, those questions haven't fundamentally changed since the late 1950s, when, the very first murmurs of Research Park were being discussed. And that's really fascinating that, you're still just trying to figure out what makes a community be the best that it can be.
That's exactly right. And who do we need to have around the table to partner to support that?
Yeah.
And, I think that when you look at this community, whether it's in CRP or it's somewhere else across our metro area, we're known for that. I mean, we, from an economic development standpoint, we call ourselves Team Huntsville, but for a reason. I mean, we approach everything, that is that we see, or that that team is a part of. They do it from a team approach. Everybody kind of in lockstep towards these goals, and it's one of the things that set our community apart in the 1950s, 1960s, and even into today, and likely in the years ahead. I mean, there's we're not without some challenges to embrace.
Yeah.
But the good news is, with the kind of history that Huntsville has had and working together, there's absolutely the opportunity to embrace those challenges, exceed them, and continue to be this great place that we all call home.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, I think, a really great note to end on. I've really enjoyed having you on the podcast. I think it's been a great, very dense discussion. I mean, we've really gone over a lot. And, I mean, it's just been super pleasant to talk to you about this and to learn more about Huntsville and Research Park. And yeah, thank you very much for coming down to the studio today. And it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invite. And anytime, I'm happy to talk about CRP and our great partners at UAH. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks so much to Erin for coming by and being on the show. It was a great opportunity to learn more about a staple of Huntsville's unique business environment. It's so exciting to me to look at the similarities between CRP and our own home here at the I2C. I hope you'll all be on the lookout for the next episode of Community Chats. In the meantime, check out our socials at UAH I2C on Instagram and Twitter, and UAH Invention to Innovation Center on Facebook. Onward and upward.